Good morning, boys and girls. So this week we're going to start something new. And behind me, you can see this big thing right here. I wonder if anybody knows what that is. It is a question mark. So when we are reading, sometimes you may see a question mark at the end of a sentence. Some of you may already know what a period looks like that comes at the end of our sentences, but sometimes we also see a question mark. So this week, when we're reading our story, we're going to be looking to see if we can ask questions. When we ask questions, we want to know who, maybe where in the story, or what time the story was taking place. So we sometimes see question marks at the end of sentences because something is being asked, or we have a question to ask about a story. Today's story, or this week's story, is The Smallest Girl in the Smallest Grade, and it is written by Justin Roberts and illustrated by Christian Robinson. So what does the author do? Do this with me. The author writes the words. What does the illustrator do? Do this part with me. The illustrator draws or paints the pictures. Last week we were looking at our illustrations, our drawings in the book to see if we could figure out what the book's about, and it had no words. This week our book does have words, so we're going to be asking questions about the story, and then we're going to be seeing if there are questions in the story. When we ask questions, there's some good times to ask questions. When we ask questions, we ask them before. We might have them before, and sometimes your teacher might ask some questions before we read to see if you can figure out what the story is about. A lot of times we ask questions while we're reading or during reading, and then we may have questions after we read, or your teacher may give you a question and you have to answer it. So before, during, and after we ask questions. And it says the text and the illustrations help us answer the questions. So the words in our book and the illustrations will help us answer these questions. So I'm going to read today's book. And if you have a question about the story, then save it so that way when you come on your day, you'll be able to do this with your teacher and ask these great questions that you have. Or your teacher's going to ask you some questions and you're going to be prepared to answer them. So this book is called The Smallest Girl in the Smallest Grade. So here we go. Hardly anyone noticed young Sally McCabe. She was the smallest girl in the smallest grade. Sure, her name could be heard in the daily roll call. That means like taking attendance. And she marched with her books down the same school hall. But hardly anyone noticed young Sally McCabe. And they certainly didn't know, or at least didn't mention, that Sally was paying super extra special attention. She paid attention to the abandoned kite with that tangled string, to the 27 keys on the janitor's ring, to the leaves as they turned green to gold in the fall, to the time Tommy Torino was tripped in the hall. I already have a question. I wonder why this kite is stuck in the tree. That's Miss Baumgartner asking a question about the story. I also have another question. Why does the janitor have 27 keys? Why do you think the janitor might have 27 keys? She watched as the wildflowers tipped towards the light and heard the howl of a hound dog late one night. She was there when the stray cats who normally fought conducted a meeting in the church parking lot. So these cats normally fought, but they were conducting a meeting. Wonder if you have a question about that. She saw Kevin McCoon get pushed off a slide and the oncoming tears that he wanted to hide. And she'll never forget that parent-teacher day when Billy's much larger father suddenly dragged him away. But through all the mean words and the cold stares, no one even noticed that Sally was there. And that Sally was paying super extra special attention. She'd seen how a whisper could make someone cower. I wonder what the word cower means. Do you know what the word cower means? Like a bulldozer crushing through fields of wildflowers, and it kept piling up, then discarded debris, those beautiful kites tangled in trees. So on February 3rd at 11:29, Sally stepped straight out of the lunchroom line. She said, "I'm tired of seeing this terrible stuff. Stop hurting each other. This is enough." Now, a few laughed out loud or didn't care that there was some girl with her hand in the air. But then something super extra special happened that day as Howard O. Henry suddenly set down his tray. Like waves rolling in one after another, first Molly rose up, then Michael's twin brother. It was Tyrone and Terrence, then Amanda and Paul, who pushed out their chairs and stretched their arms tall. From the friendly lunch lady with the dishes she carted to that new third-grade teacher who had only recently started. Yes, everyone was there. Even Principal Claire had joined little Sally with their finger in the air. What do you think it meant when they held their finger in the air with Sally? Why do you think they joined in? And though hound dogs were destined to howl at night, and mostly stray cats' meetings would end up in fights, and kites would continue to get stuck in trees, they all felt for a moment like the janitor's keys, fastened together with a heavy steel ring that held all the secrets to unlock everything. As the world returned to the way that it was, Sally noticed the difference, as she usually does, when Billy paused briefly to open the door for Mrs. O'Connell and 17 more. So the little boy started opening the door for everybody. Or when Molly scooched over to make some space on the coral risers for Ellen and Grace. These moments that often get taken for granted, a wildflower appearing that no one had planted. So it seems to me in the story that the little boys and girls at the school, they were not very kind, or they did things to one another that made others feel sad. Or I saw some bullying going on, like in our last week's story, I Walk with Vanessa. And Sally noticed all of these things too, and it sounded like she kind of had enough. So let's see if the little boys and girls start to change in the story. It looks to me like they are. The swing soon resumed in their rhythm and sway, and day turned to night, and night turned to day. People remembered and would quite often mention that Sally had been paying super extra special attention. And now the world would transform and change could be made by the smallest girl in the smallest grade. I noticed that we're no longer pushing our friends down the slide. We're taking turns and we're gently helping them go down the slide, not just knocking them down. And I see friends here playing together and jump roping and sharing the ball. And that was the end. So, there were some questions that I asked you guys during reading. There might be some questions you now have after you've listened to the story. And I'm going to add some of these questions up here that I mentioned. So one of the questions that I mentioned was, why was the kite stuck in the tree? Why was the kite stuck in the tree? And I'm going to put a question mark. And I know this might be far away from you, but I just read it. Why was the kite stuck in the tree? The other question I had is why the janitor had 27 keys, but I thought of another question. Why did the little boy push the other one down the slide? So why was the little boy being mean? I'm going to say that again. Why was the little boy being mean? So you might have some more questions when you do this with your teacher about our story. And I'm going to go ahead and share one other thing with you because there are lots of words that are question words, and a lot of them start with a W. A lot of them start with a W. So, these are question words. Who, what, when, where, why, and will. So who in the story, what they are doing, when they might be doing it, where they're doing it, and why. Those are all question words. And I have a little song to sing with you guys. This is my Flying Five guy friend. That's why we have 5 fingers on our hands. And he is going to help us with our question words. And I'm going to sing this song. This is how it goes. So I'm going to turn my computer this way. All right, so here's my Flying Five, and this is how the song goes. I've got the who, what, where, when, why, and how. I've got the who, what, where, when, why, and how. I've got the who, what, where, when, why, and how. I've got the main idea in my hand. And your teachers are going to teach you about the main idea. But for right now, we're just working on those question words. The who, the what, when, where, and why. Okay,